You have every ingredient you could possibly want in a trial. You've got Beverly Hills, you've got murder, and then you've got one other ingredient. It's now on television.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're breaking down the wild legal saga of the Menendez brothers, including the LA District Attorney's recommendation that could see them walk free after nearly 30 years in prison.
They have been in prison for nearly 35 years. I believe that they have paid their debt to society.
Horrible events bonded us in a way that will never be broken.
By now, you're probably pretty familiar with the torrid trials and tribulations of Lyle and Eric Menendez. For the uninitiated, though, it's important to remember that at one point, the Menendez brothers' case was considered the trial of the century and captivated the public's attention.
It's been 34 years of incarceration. And for the first time, I feel like it's a conversation where people now can understand.
This was largely due to the deeply heinous nature of the brothers' crimes, in addition to their circumstances. Lyle and Eric were the sons of Jose and Kitty Menendez, a highly successful career businessman and former beauty queen respectively. Perhaps even more significantly than that, the Menendez family lived in Beverly Hills, California. Cut to August 20th, 1989, when Lyle and Eric called 911 to report that they had found their parents brutally shot to death in their living room. The first question on everyone's minds was, how could this happen here?
It's not supposed to happen in Beverly Hills. A movie executive and his wife were brutally slain in their million-dollar mansion. There were no clues and no suspects.
For nearly a year, the Menendez brothers were unwavering in their hypothesis that their parents had been slain by the mafia, possibly as retaliation for a business deal gone tragically awry.
Let's just run through this first strike. We both entered the house that night through the front door.
Yeah.
And you went directly in the family room?
Well, yeah, I usually do.
Jose did indeed have a reputation for being a shark that is notoriously unscrupulous in his work, willing to say and do anything to anyone in order to close such a deal. After all potential leads had dissipated, local authorities began to focus their attention on the brothers themselves.
The idea that I was having a good time is absurd. Everything was to cover up this horrible pain of not wanting to be alive.
After all, their $700,000 spending spree in the wake of the killings had raised several eyebrows. How could two young men, ostensibly in mourning following the graphic murders of their parents, feel like going out and buying, en masse no less, Rolexes, a Porsche Carrera, and a $50,000 tennis coach?
They started spending the money as if it was water, as if they'd been desperate for that kind of money.
As we know now, Lyle and Eric Menendez were responsible for killing their parents. Once the police determined this, the brothers were swiftly arrested and held separately at the Los Angeles County Jail.
There should have been a police response, and we would have been arrested. We had no alibi. The gunpowder residue was all over our hands. Under normal circumstances, they give you a gunpowder residue test.
But, to be clear, they didn't voluntarily give themselves up. No, their admission of guilt inadvertently came from Eric himself, having confessed to the murders on tape as he was being recorded by his therapist, Dr. L. Jerome Oziel.
I and any therapist carries with him or with her at all times hundreds or thousands of people's secrets. And it's a sacred obligation to preserve those secrets.
Ready for yet another curveball? Oziel didn't bring those tapes to the police himself. Rather, Judalon Smith, his mistress, looking to take revenge on Oziel for refusing to leave his wife, took it upon herself to inform the authorities of what the doctor was in possession of, while simultaneously aiming to press charges against Oziel himself.
I tried to give the information that I had that would, lead them to be able to make an arrest.
As is unfortunately all too common in legal trials, court proceedings were delayed for 2 years as the admissibility of Oziel's recordings as evidence was hotly debated.
It ended up in the California Supreme Court on the issue of these tapes, whether or not the facts were sufficient to get a waiver of the psychotherapist-patient privilege.
After a judge's 1990 ruling that the tapes were valid was appealed, a subsequent 1992 Supreme Court of California ruling once again determined that. That is to say, with the highly notable exception of the tape on which Eric Menendez made his fateful confession, the tapes were mostly admissible. An LA County grand jury formally charged the brothers with the murder of their parents in December 1992.
It was just very tragic for me personally that something I was doing to try to keep a secret from coming out was the reason that my brother then said, and Leslie, well, now you have to.
Another fateful decision that would alter the trajectory of the case and possibly American pop culture as a whole, the fact that cameras were allowed into the courtroom, creating the now infamous media circus that the case is largely known for. Lyle and Eric's trials, yes, trials plural, dragged on for 4 years.
I deeply did not want to talk about anything that happened in our past. And so my main concern was trying to avoid that at all costs.
In their respective courtroom experiences, the brothers were initially tried separately. Eric's lawyer, Leslie Abramson, laid out the now immortalized defense that shook the nation and the world.
And what happened after that?
Jose hit Lyle with his closed fist.
Did he seem to hit him hard?
Yes, he did.
Lyle would have been about 5 years old at this
Yes.
Abramson revealed that Lyle and Eric had made a shocking confession to her. Jose was a violent abuser, with Kitty acting as a silent bystander while the abuse was carried out. The argument was that the brothers were motivated to kill their parents as a result of years of severe systematic mistreatment.
People who have such small contact with my father saying, this was the most intimidating, worst human I've met in my whole life. So that's why there was 0 character witnesses on my parents' behalf. Why couldn't you find that one person?
The brothers' emotional testimonies, but particularly Lyle's, were so harrowing and so moving that Judge Stanley Weisberg declared a hung jury and implemented a number of limitations on their second trial held from 1995 into 1996.
Was doing what your father wanted of you important?
That's what made him happy, and that's what I wanted to do.
Why did you want to make him happy?
So he would love me.
The latter trial banned the media from the courtroom, and perhaps most crucially, heavily restricted discussions of the alleged abuse. These decisions are speculated to have influenced the jury's thinking, and on July 2, 1996, nearly 7 years after the Menendez brothers took their parents' lives, Judge Weisberg sentenced Lyle and Eric to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
We would have these talks, and he would show me, and he would fondle me, and he would ask me to do the same with him, and I would touch him, and we would undress.
At this point, we should note that public opinion regarding Lyle and Eric was deeply unfavorable.
They should suffer just like their parents did.
The public couldn't get enough. Overnight, the Menendez case blew up all over the world.
With general audiences mostly sharing the sentiment that the brothers were spoiled rich kids who were lying about their alleged abuse and were motivated by greed, having simply sought to lay claim to their father's vast fortune, estimated by the New York Times to be valued at $32 million, adjusted for inflation in 2024.
Oh, come on, they're so adorable. They are too fine to go to prison. Whoa! I know they don't exactly have an airtight case, okay? Lyle went on a little bit of a spending spree a week after the murders.
However, this all changed in the 2020s when something curious happened. A grassroots TikTok campaign gradually emerged, demanding the brothers' release.
I went to TikTok and found thousands of videos. Most of them are becoming very well educated on the case.
These TikTok users cited the unequal treatment they'd received as men who claimed abuse.
There was a healing and a lifting of a weight from having talked openly about it. I began to receive a lot of letters from other victims, and I began to connect with their own experiences because they were similar to mine.
The push to free the brothers grew stronger in mid-2024 when Ryan Murphy's Monsters debuted on Netflix, depicting a fictionalized version of the events of the case that was seen as largely sympathetic to them.
This is done. This is done. You understand? No more between you two. And you are never to touch him. Not ever.
This was alongside the Menendez brothers, a documentary also released by Netflix that interviewed individuals who had historically been involved with the case in a modern-day context. Amid a surge of support for the brothers, buoyed by these Netflix releases, LA District Attorney George Gascon announced on Thursday, October 24, 2024, that he was formally recommending resentencing Lyle and Eric to the judiciary of California.
I came to a place where I believe that under the law, resentencing is appropriate, and I am going to recommend that to a court tomorrow.
It should be noted that the Netflix projects were not the only factors contributing to Gascon's decision.
When defendants are younger than 25 at the time of the commission of the crime, there is now a new law, new legislation that allows those individuals to receive early parole.
Two new groundbreaking pieces of evidence, unveiled relatively recently before the announcement, played a huge part. These would be a letter written by Eric to his cousin Andy Cano, which detailed Jose's abuse, as well as Eric's deteriorating mental state as a result. The other was a damning 2023 Peacock documentary in which Menudo boy band member Roy Rosello accused the late Jose Menendez of drugging and assaulting him at just 14 years of age.
Los quiero en la máquina de Coca-Cola, en la fiambrera, en los juguetes. Menudo va a ser el grupo más grande del mundo.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Other information that led to the recommendation included attestation on the part of prison officials on the brothers' behalf.
They could have done what many other people do, which is basically said, you know what, I'm here for the rest of my life, so I'm going to do whatever. I'm going to misbehave, I'm going to join gangs.
These represent, as outlined by the New York Times, working as, quote, hospice aides to help sick inmates, for running Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and meditation groups for inmates, and for completing college courses.
But they never did that. To the contrary, even though they didn't think that they would ever be let free, they engaged in a different journey.
In a letter written on Lyle's behalf by Victor H. Cortez, an employee of the prison where the brothers are incarcerated, effusively praises the elder Menendez brother for, quote, dedicating himself to personal growth, the betterment of his fellow inmates, and overall stability of the prison environment. After 3 decades in prison, the Menendez brothers' release would represent a significant advancement for victims of abuse, particularly young men.
However, because of their age, under the law, since they were under 26 years of age, at the time that these crimes occurred, they would be eligible for parole immediately.
What do you think of the Menendez brothers' case? Let us know in the comments below.
And if the parole concurs with my assessment, and it will be their decision, they will be released accordingly.
Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.